an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Just want to check, if you don't mind, the classic in your questions box, can you please let me know if you are seeing my screen? Sorry, I'm late here. I'm having some technical difficulties, which usually don't occur. So I'm sorry, I'm getting off to a slow start. And I can actually still see people joining, so I'm not too bad. All right, can't see, got it. Thank you. Yep. Okay, sorry, I'm playing a little catch up, everybody. Think you could see the screen now. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the workshop here. I'm trying to set up my other screen so I can see all my questions. Oh, that was crazy. I always like starting out with a little bit of extra stress. It's pretty rare, but not today. All right, got it. All right, I'm almost ready to totally rock and roll. Perfect. I've got Skype and some other things open in the background because I was trying to get this launched. So if you see some strange stuff, please ignore it. All right, here we go. Today, well, hello everybody and welcome to this WKO workshop. My name is Tim Cusick and I am the Training Peaks WKO leader. I still hearing some technical difficulties. Got it. I am Tim Cusick and I'm the Training Peaks WKO leader. All right, all should be good now. Today we're here to talk about training impact score and some of the questions and polls and information that you put online. These workshops are really meant to be something that's more responsive to the Facebook group. And if you're part of that Facebook group, you had an opportunity to participate in the poll and ask some questions. I think I'm going to tackle them all. My goal is to go through about 8 to 10 slides, which should take about 20 minutes. Tackling some of your questions and giving some basics. And I'm actually going to jump back and forth between your questions and my WKO, trying to give some feedback on some case study kind of work. Let's start off with training impact score, or TIS, its definition. It simply is a quantitative adaptive scoring of training modalities' impact on adaptation on both anaerobic and aerobic fitness. And the reality is, when we think about these things, right, we come back to this classic model when we think about all training. Stress is something external, so you apply stress to the system. When you apply stress to the system then goes under strain. So stress is an external thing. I'm applying, like if you're going 300 watts, right, that 300 watts is a measurement of external stress. But as you're going 300 watts, your body is undergoing strain, how much effort that's taking you and energy that's taking you. And that strain is what specifically leads to adaptation. So the reality is stress, plus strain equals adaptation. So if you think about what training impact score, it's an impact on adaptation. So power is a stress score. Training stress score is a stress score. And you could say, let's talk about strain more. And I know there's some models and some things that have kind of gone on to try to measure strain. But strain, why bother? If you can jump all the way to impact on adaptation, it's better to start talking about this adaptation. That being said, the reason we didn't do or call it like adaptation score, the reason we called it impact is we don't control the variables. Meaning you could do really great training, right? And the reality is, you could do some great work, you could do great training, things like that. But if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't eat the right foods, if your nutrition isn't good, let's say you do 3 straight weeks of really good training, you get in a big block, but you sleep 4 hours a night, you eat McDonald's every night, nothing against McDonald's, but you know what I mean. Chances of you actually adapting to some predictor model are pretty low. You have to have all those variables in place. So therefore, we took an approach of trying to measure impact on the system, which should result in impact on adaptation. We're just not taking responsibility for the rest of your habits. We're just measuring the training load. When you start thinking about training impact, you think about what's known from a physiological sense, and I'm not going to get too deep into the physiology because this is a workshop. You could always ask questions in the Facebook group if you want. The system interplay, right? So when you make energy of any sort, you basically, in general, you have two major ways your body converts nutrients to energy. And you have it aerobic metabolism and anaerobic metabolism. And the difference is with or without oxygen. Now, the fuel source is also different in those in an oversimplification. I'll show you a slightly better chart here in a moment. Whether you're burning fat or carbs or even protein are part of that. But the reality is there's two general ways you convert nutrients to energy. And there is a total of 3 energy systems that interact to supply fuel needed for exercise. Now, the key to those systems really comes in with intensity and duration determining the method order. So if you simply know, and bet most people on this meeting will know this, it really is, if you look at it like maximal exercise time and percentage of where the energy comes from, right? Your short is your ATP-CP system. That supplies your fight or flight fuel. It's very short-lived, a couple of seconds. Maybe out to 20 seconds max if you're naturally good or naturally have a pretty high store, but expect more like 10 to 12 seconds at the norm. As that system burns out, your anaerobic system takes over, and your ATP system is the fastest to respond. Your anaerobic system is the second fastest, and that'll burn pretty well anywhere from 45 to 90 seconds, maybe a little further, depending on your fitness, and can kind of go out a little bit further, maybe to 2.5, 3 minutes. And in the end of the day, your aerobic system, which is the slowest, your kind of fat burning aerobic energy system, it comes up slowly, right? Because it's not a very fast to respond system to exercise intensity. And at some point becomes the dominant. That probably happens somewhere out there in around 3, 4, 2 minutes, even shorter when you really look at it in some athletes. And then it just becomes the ongoing energy system. You can burn energy aerobically for an extremely long time. It really is your anaerobic systems that are short. So we have a way of looking at the aerobic and anaerobic. We don't break out the ATP because it's always very limited and short. You can look in your power duration model at the aerobic and anaerobic contribution. It'll give you some insight into your ability to make energy aerobically and anaerobically based on your current power duration curve. This is really here for reference. And all I'm doing in the reference, I'm just going to leave it, on the screen. This is a little better breakdown of the systems. You'll see time, activity, how you're making energy, some of what's being utilized, when you talk about using different systems and stuff like that. So it's just a little background information. I normally put this in I normally would load my presentation right to this meeting, and you could be able to download it. But since I could not get it to load pre, I'll have to send it to you after. But I'll make a PDF and make sure everybody gets it, so you'll have this chart. Where do you find Training Impact Score? If you're looking at any of the basic or advanced WKO5 views, you will literally find a dashboard called Training Impact. If you're using custom views, you just search and add the dashboard to any existing view. The dashboard name is Training Impact. It is a workout level score to look at it this way. So you want to have your workouts open so that you have a workout view and a workout dashboard. And all you need to do is select a workout, select that Training Impact dashboard, and you will see these Training Impact scores. There's nothing sexy and exciting about a Training Impact score. It's just a number on a scale of 1 to 10, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And it is broken down into anaerobic and aerobic. Now, in this view, and this leads to confusion at times, you have a basic anaerobic versus aerobic power cycling. And this is just a basic review. This is related to, but not the actual score of your impact. This is just showing some and giving you some heat mapping version of really where you're becoming anaerobic and where you are aerobic. It's really important to know though, right? All your energy systems are always making some energy. You're not talking about which system is working. You're talking about which is the dominant system, the dominant way of producing energy. So if you see a lot of red dots, the dominant way is anaerobic, but that doesn't mean you're not producing energy aerobically. Notice when you see the red, you actually see both. So just know that all systems are always working and that it really is showing you a visual view of which system is dominating. So the reality is you have these two views of impact. This is your actual impact score. This gives you visual cues to what could be what could be accumulating here. How do we measure training impact score? It is a model-defined metric. TIS is an output of the power duration model, so therefore it's based on your current, I should put that in there, I keep meaning to do that, mean maximal power. Not unlike training stress score, TIS is weighted work with higher weight given to work done that targets either aerobic or anaerobic fitness. Impact, right? We use the model to determine areas of impact, and then we weight the amount of work that you're doing in that area of impact. Now, and it's really important to say this, and I already received this question like 2 or 3 times. What does this mean for running? I would say of all the metrics, training impact score is most cycling focused. And if I was runners and I was using runner power, I would take it with a grain of salt. Cycling has a much higher efficiency than running, right? And when you're doing metrics and you're working on things that are weighted to a power duration curve, you can assume on a bike that a person doesn't really have a broad range of efficiency. And you're talking about gross mechanical efficiency, GE, you could call it, or, and it's usually around 22%. Let's just use a number, 22, 23%. You're always in that tight range. When we run and we fatigue when we run and stuff like that, other variables can come into play because here's the flaw. Somebody's going to come back and say, hey, Tim, you guys need to do this for running with power. We would if you were truly measuring power. The thing I think that people get lost on that are training with running power, you don't really using torque. There's no direct strain gauge, right, in your power collection. It's an algorithm. It's using, an accelerometer to determine and estimate power, and sometimes very good. But when we're looking at estimate powers, whether you're going from run to run or system to system, the difference between a stride and Gorman, for example, is massive. We can't create, since it's not based truly on, a strain gauge, and we're not riding a highly efficient bike, you have 2 different variables that we can't deal with very well in running. One, the difference between power gathering systems in running, whether you're using stride wind, Garmin, and then 2, the variable of efficiency. There's a much broader range of efficiency. That being said, I think the power duration curve, and I've seen a lot of work with Steve Palladino and the guys, really pointed out how close it is and how well it works. The 2 metrics that really struggle the most are TTE and TIS. So it's really tough for runners. So if I was runners, I would take it with a grain of salt. I would try to use it, see what it means to you, and I'll give some insight into that later, but be careful of over focusing on training impact score. I wish I had a better answer. If the running power meter companies come to a consistent standard, we can do it better. Until they come to a consistent standard, we cannot. And look, and that's the nature. It's a newer technology. The technology will mature in time, but we're just not there yet. At the end of the day, that means that you have a model-defined training impact score. Training impact score measures the impact of training on aerobic and anaerobic systems. Training impact score is adaptive as it's based on your current power duration curve and therefore your current fitness. So as your fitness changes, right, we will see more and more impact, or your impact will be current. So as you get fitter, the scores will be relative to your fitness. As you lose fitness, unfortunately, the scores will be relative to losing fitness. And your TIS is individualized to your unique physiology, meaning no 2 runners, regardless if they have like low stamina, high stamina, 2.5 hours. I see these type of questions all the time comparing athletes. Somebody just put one in the question box. It's, does shape of PDC curve have an effect on training impact? Yes, it's unique to you and your power duration curve. So understand it's totally individualized to you and your power duration curve. The reality is that is how it works, I guess. Here, actually, I'm going to talk about it right here better. So the requirements of an accurate training intensity score, I covered this really well in DFRC, and I think a lot of people really understood when I was done. So I'm going to say it again here, not in as many slides. It is a model-defined metric. Therefore, training impact score is an output of the power duration model based on mean maximal power. An accurate power duration curve must be established and maintained. The number of people who put in the Facebook group, my Training Peaks or my WKO5 is broken because DFRC doesn't work or training intensity score doesn't work, and then they put in a ticket and I just respond to the ticket. When was the last time you tested? And they're like, well, I don't test in the winter. Well, guess what? If you don't follow the testing protocols, which I think if you don't test in your training, that's a mistake anyway, let alone what its effect on the model. But if you don't follow the testing protocols and therefore the model's not correct, you should not use training impact score. It won't be correct. How do you make sure your model's correct? Well, you have to feed the model. So you basically need a maximal effort in the short, medium, and long ranges, and you need that effort to be in 30 to 90 days. I typically like, as I say down here, 30 to 45 to keep things accurate. I highly suggest a baseline test at the beginning of each season or after an extended break. Ongoing testing based on normalized residuals every 30 to 45. I'd continue to roll through those every 30 to 45 days. I'll give an example of what that means. And just keep reviewing your normalized residuals for confidence. What is the baseline structured testing? Max efforts. Here's a 5-day protocol. I do this at the beginning of every season with my athletes. And it basically is a 5-minute test, a really good warm-up, blah, blah, blah. A full-on kind of 20 to 30-minute test, and I give some specifics based on your known phenotype, a full-on 1-minute test, a little recovery, and finally some sprints. And these are max efforts. So unlike the traditional 20-minute test or some other tests like in training and racing with a power meter where you're kind of lumping them into a day or two, this is one test per day because you want truly maximal numbers. Once you've established that early in the season, all you need to do is use your ongoing unstructured testing. You just blend your tests into your training. And if you go to the WKO Advanced Cycling view, look at the power duration model dashboard, scroll down a little bit, right? You just have to scroll down a little bit. And you are, you can see the normalized residuals. So the blue dots, basically what a normalized residual is distance from zero. Some oversimplification, but that's what it is. So this would correlate with your power duration curve. If it was the red line is your power duration curve. If your mean maximal power is over your power, higher than your estimated curve, the dots are higher. When it's lower, the dots are lower. Those are the key areas that test. So I would look at this one just visually. You can see there's a big gap here. This athlete, who is partially me and partially a collection of data. I need to one day just make one clean me so I know what's going on. But the reality is this athlete needs a test in this time range. You can see how off their normalized residuals are right there. But we even make it easy for you. We give you the short, the medium target. So we're telling you the time targets for short, medium, and long. And we're actually giving you a watt range to attempt to exceed the bottom line target. So the reality is we're giving you that information. Now, the way you build unstructured testing, build it into your regular training. Like I might say to this athlete next week, maybe they're doing a harder day next week where they are going to do some higher intensity work. Now, we know this is for a lot of us here in the North, this is winter training. We're not doing much intensity. But when you do intensity, I might go out and say, hey, here's what I need you to do. Go out and jam a full-on 145, right? Get a good 5 to 10 minute recovery in, then, repeat whatever, get a couple VO2 max intervals or whatever you have that athlete doing. Training is testing and testing is training. The more you just relax your athlete and get in some of those efforts, the better you're going to be. a nice clean curve. You shouldn't have any normalized residuals below 5 or 7. Look, here's 5, right? So you can see this one's a problem. This one's a problem. If your blue dots are pretty close to your red, like if you did the unstructured training in an ongoing fashion, and then you don't really even need to ever formally test. Once you've done the baseline, the formal testing is done. And your blue dots will be pretty close to your red line and nice and clean. If you can't see the training impact, don't forget to make sure you have a workout open, WKO5 basic cycling or advanced cycling view. Just use the basic cycling workout review. You need to be in the, remember to make sure you have a workout open first and then change your view. So let's talk about the challenges of TIS and then jump into kind of how to make it work. So when we were coming up with TIS, it's really a tough score because as you begin to talk about weighting things and this and that, the hardest part is, right, we really have the ability to create the score. It's normalizing the score that actually is the biggest challenge. So let's say we have the ability to, whenever you see a score on a scale of 1 to 10, right, you always think everything is neat and clean. It just works easy. It just, the output is 1 through 10. But when you try to think about creating metrics, particularly ones that are individualized, to a power duration curve, the output scores aren't always the same. And somehow you have to mathematically convert them to 1 through 10. And I know that sounds odd, but I was trying these workshops to give people some insights into the things that Kevin and I struggle with that, have impact on how the end number should be used. We, time and time again, wanted to just make a 3-number score, like no impact, great impact, sort of good impact, right? Just like a 1, 2, 3, or not even, we almost not even scored it. But we figured people would generally want a little bit to learn, and to learn how to use the numbers over time, you needed a little more incrementalism. So we ended up settling on a 10-point score, but we did so in 3 key categories, which I'm going to show on the next slide. The downside of what's happened there is people have really focused on the absolute score. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about here is this idea of an absolute score. So this is one. So when you start measuring, remember I said it's a metabolic fitness, right? Your metabolic fitness is only one aspect of performance. So don't think that it's the only way, and I'm going to actually case study this a little more. So just remember I said that. It's only one aspect of your training. Training and performance is a blend of different aspects, right? So you're only looking at one element of training here. You also have to ask yourself, what is the reasonable goal? I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a moment either, right? The thing I hate about scoring something on a scale of 1 to 10, guess what everyone listening to this webinar wants every time? 10, right? 10. I'm going for 10. I'm going over the top, dude. 10. Is it 10 always reasonable? And is it always right? Might be a better question. Then you also need to think about the periodization of TIS scoring. When should you be looking for 10s? So it's the middle of the winter right now. Should you be looking at 10s at anaerobic? And if you scored a 10, would you say that's a good thing? Or is that maybe not so a good thing? And one of the things to accomplish that, we have to stop thinking about good, bad, right? And begin to think in the term effective, or actually most effective, and not most effective or not effective, right? So we have to ask ourselves, how does training intensity score fit within periodization? And then we also have to understand that there is a time versus duration, right? So I could go out, I could do a 6-hour ride. Let's say I laid on my couch for 6 months, right? And I can go out and do a 6-hour ride and score a 10 aerobically. Is that a good thing? So at what point in time, and how am I utilizing duration in those roles? So I'm going to get into all of that in case study. But before we break into the questions and therefore the case studies, I want to show this screen. It's in the article. I really feel bad about the not being able to pre-send you the right information, I wanted you to relink the training impact article. If you're looking, and one of the things everybody should do is pre-read the training impact article. The training impact article, which I'll link in this presentation when I send out, it's on WKO5 on what's new in WKO, and you'll see an article on training impact. It's definitely something you want to read. And in that are these two charts. And what it is here's how you should look at your scoring of 1 to 10. Don't look at the raw number as absolute, right? You really have 3 areas of impact, and the red is your anaerobic score and the blue is your aerobic, even though they're relatively the same as far as impact. So if you're scoring a 1, 2, 3, you're really having minor anaerobic impact. Workouts in this range really have little to no effect on your aerobic system. They might do a little bit of maintenance, don't get me wrong, maybe a tiny bit of maintenance, but you're really not working hard enough to impact that system. Now, if you're out doing a recovery run or a recovery ride, you would want both your impacts very low, right? You're not trying to gain that day. And that's why it's so important to not think about more is more. You have to think about this idea of cost benefit, right? And how it plays into things. The next is a range of 4 through 7, which is you're having maintenance and some build. Here's where where exactly that, does it happen exactly to 5.5? I don't know. It's not that precise, but it gives you an idea. Here's where you're maintaining or building anaerobic impact, and the same with aerobic impact. So workouts in this range impact the anaerobic system. Lower scores in this range are quality maintenance targets. Higher scores in this place begin to have enough strain to actually build adaptation. So the reality is, though, even if you talk about anaerobic, do you really want all of your anaerobic work to be, some massive overreach? I would say no at certain time frames. Now, maybe I'm 4 weeks out or 3 weeks out from my major event and I need anaerobic energy. Sure. At that point, I might want to see 8, 9, 10 over 5, 6, 7. But if I'm working on some and just maintaining anaerobic work right now in the winter, I'm pretty content seeing a 5 or a 6. It's a pretty good number right now. I don't want to be going crazy. I just want to see the number. Now, in all of these, the numbers I'm talking about are for the whole workout. It's not for an interval. That's exactly the example of the over precision that we look for. But in the same side, and I'll show it in the case studies, that's why I gave the blue-red dots. So you have a feeling of, some of the impact of where it's hitting. But the reality is you are really looking at the score, each one, the score of 1 to 10 for the overall workout. So then once you get to 8, 9, 10, now you're banging that system hard. You're hitting it really hard, right? And it's workouts in this range have high impact on the anaerobic system, will typically result in overreaching and will elicit adaptation. But remember, and it says in both these, read all the words. While these workouts are highly impactful on anaerobic fitness, the high strain causes fatigue and can lead to non-functional overreaching or even overtraining if achieved too frequently. And I think this is where it's really important that we understand that this is impact on the adaptation, meaning banging away at these numbers. It's not, and understand what I'm about to say here, right? It's not a prediction, and it doesn't necessarily correlate with your RPE perfectly. It's not about how much it hurts. Even though, don't get me wrong, if you went and did an anaerobic workout in 8, 9, 10, it's going to really hurt. I think we all know that. But it's not about correlating to RPE. It's about helping you understand that there are ways to train that maybe are more impactful than hurtful. And that's understanding that's the art. And the art gets lost in all this data at times. And it always surprises people who hear some of my webinars and this and that I keep coming back to this idea that, the metric is a tool, and it's a tool, it's a science. Science helps us make decisions. Data science specifically helps us make better decisions, better educated decisions, but it is not the decision. If you just use the impact data to make decisions, You would say, hey, this one workout gave me a 9-10. I'm just going to keep doing that, right? It's the best number. Must be the best. And you keep doing that. Do it for about 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks in a row and see what happens to your performance. I guarantee it will go down. Too much fatigue. You eventually are breaking the system. All we're giving you as a tool is to raise awareness and understanding of what that workout is doing, what system is it impacting, and how much relative impact. But you see it, I have it here, right? What scares me is I see all the questions. And look, this is my opinion. And as everybody knows, I usually say it up front. Don't just take my opinion because I say it forcefully or I say it with conviction. I've spent a lot of time in coaching and learning how to coach. As a fair amount of you know, I coach at a pretty high level. I have the luxury of working with some of the best athletes in the world. And I'm trying to share my experience, but don't just believe me because of that. Go out and learn. When you look at impact scores and these type of things, don't fall in love with the score because there's a rule of diminishing returns, right? The most painful way to exercise is not always the most helpful way to exercise. There's an intersection point between that cost benefit you might have seen me preach, right? Between the fatigue and the result. You use the data, not just this data, but other data to create a better decision-making process. That decision-making process increases the odds of your success because you're more aware, you're more knowledgeable, you're making better educated decisions, and it's that decision-making process that is actually the art of coaching. These scores don't I've already had, tons of times I've had people say we need a point something like 8.5. They're not even really that. There's no probably measurable difference time between an 8 and a 9. It's not that specific. It is a little bit. One's a little better than the other, but how much better? Meh. Just think within these ideas. Think within. Keep this chart top of mind awareness when you're looking at the training impact score. Okay. Now, let's get into some of the questions, and then I'm going to try to jump back and forth between WKO and stuff like that. From this point forward, it's going to be flip-flop, whatever. You're going to have to live with my more free-flowing. Got off to a bad start with the technology issues, but hopefully we're smoothing it out now. So here was the poll view of the questions that were supplied. Number 2 question was, what does it take to make TIS accurate? I just showed you. Feed the model. Do your testing. If you don't maintain an accurate testing and protocol, which, let me rephrase something I said. As a coach, I will absolutely tell you, whether you're a coach yourself or a self-coach athlete, if you're not testing on some regular basis, you are doing yourself a disservice or your athletes a disservice. Testing is crucial to ensure that your training is creating the desired results you want. If you test, the other benefit you get is you maintain a clean model. A clean model gives you all of these great metrics, whether you're talking about FRC and TT and FTP and PMAX, right? Or if you're talking about training impact or DFRC, it gives you all these tools to look at data and make better decisions. So it's an added benefit of getting the model, but I still think testing is at the core of coaching. How is my TSS score individualized? I already answered that. It's based off your power duration curve and it's weighting. And if you actually think about an extreme oversimplification, because training impact score is one of the more complex formulas in there, is it's really time around your power duration curve over above. Where can I find TIS? I already showed you it's in the workout WKO5 basic view. So answered those questions. Now let's dig into some of the ones that we didn't answer with a little case study work. How do I use TIS to improve my training? Well, let's talk about that, right? So I have 2 workouts here, and then I'm going to actually jump over and do them. And these are 2 different workouts. This is a VO2 max workout. This is 5 times 3 minutes, which you see here, the athletes doing VO2 max workout, right? And I already received the question, and I'm going to give you a prime example where you have to learn and have knowledge here. So is it normal to have an extremely high TIS anaerobic in a VO2 max interval session? No, it's not normal to have a super high one, but it really depends on how much time you spend right on that ragged edge. But yet most people are like, but wait a minute, a VO2 max interval is over threshold. I should be burning a lot of anaerobic energy. But go back and say, what does VO2 max mean, right? It's your maximal aerobic uptake, aerobic. And it is really, now don't get me wrong, for athletes, and this is where the individualization is important. For athletes with high FRC, yes, because if you're a high FRC athlete, like look at this athlete here. This is it's got it on indoor. So this is me. Like I said, this is a fair amount of my data, but I don't upkeep this in the version I do screenshots for. My FRC is very high. Like in the summer, I'm usually at 30. And even right now, it's like at 22. So if I go out and go really hard on VO2 max intervals, like if I would go out and do this 5 times, I don't think this is me, to be honest with you. Two things happen. One, I can go way harder than I should be going. So I create a lot of anaerobic burn, right? But is that really the purpose? This goes back to the point I was making. Understand the modality, right? Understand what you're trying to accomplish. And that number just helps raise awareness. Don't think higher number, good, bad, right? Think about it as a tool to evaluating the effectiveness of what you're setting out to accomplish. So the reality is I can burn up, particularly 5 of them, right? I can cheat because I can just, particularly at 3 minutes, I can go anaerobic longer, right? So I can do that. Even if I did this workout, and I think this is me, 4 times 8 minutes, so longer anaerobic work, right? Typically, higher, I can still burn a lot of anaerobic work in there and score all the way to a 9. So at the end of the day, what's the difference between these two workouts? 15 minutes of total time of interval and 24 minutes of total time of interval. When we drill into these in a moment, obviously these would be done at higher power. These would be done at lower power, right? This had a higher impact on my anaerobic system. 2 reasons. One, I did more, it's just time, right? 24 minutes versus 15 minutes. But then think about what I'm about to say. Why? For a lot of athletes, that's because if you knock a couple watts off the time, maybe they can do more time, meaning they can get more work in an 8-minute format than in a 3-minute format. And if you can see here, they're both, this is an hour and 10 minutes, and this is about an hour and 20 of a workout, similar time range workouts. It's just finding which maximally impacts my system. Now really think about what I'm about to say, and I'll actually do it in WKO, but this is working quite nicely here for the moment. I have a high anaerobic capability, right? But that being said, that's anaerobic energy system. So if I want to build that system over time and make it sustainable, I need to spend time there, get the higher score, right? Here, because it's based off my power duration curve, my whole power duration curve, not just my indoor one, which you're seeing here, is I'm just not going hard enough. Meaning I'm not getting enough time hard enough to do that. But the question is, which one can I do for the least fatigue? Would it be better for me to score a 9? I may need to do 8 3-minute intervals, which would be the same 24 minutes, right? The comparison would be those two. Which for my system creates the most fatigue? Which am I more motivated to do? That's the type of thinking you have to blend in. This is just giving a score. It's just telling you the score, the number, the impact. So TIS brings about an awareness of system, target, and impact. What is effective and what is not? Is it doing what you think? And then therefore the ability to look at different and similar intervals is important. So if I jump over to WKO, so I've tagged 4 workouts for these 2 case studies. So here's the one we were looking at. And you could see, right, here's my 5.0, here's my 3.0. The downside of me, I've got to transfer my actual data set here because I can't guarantee it's always accurate. But here's my 4 times 5 minutes. Now look when I use them with DFRC. Most people who, particularly those who watch the DFRC, right, I never went deep. I wasn't going in this 5-minute hard enough to really hit it hard. And anaerobic score actually picked that up pretty nicely, right? It didn't really give me credit. Maybe if I went maximal with these, like just all out crazy, and you guys know at certain times of year I like max intervals, that would have been a 9, and my purple line would have been all the way down, to here, and I would have burned deep. But at this time of year, you shouldn't be doing that. This time of year, and I don't know when I pulled these from, these are all old, but if you're at this time of the year, this is a good VO2 maintenance workout, right? Go back to my chart. And right now, I'm not trying to build anaerobic energy. I'm just maintaining. I don't want to waste fatigue on something that might not be productive. So I do the work needed to maintain it. A 5 score gets me into the maintenance mode, right? And I'm going to jump back to this because I think it's important that people understand it. The 5 score gets me back into the maintenance mode, and I've done my maintenance work. Why, at this time of the year, would I want to kill it? Now, put me 4 to 5 weeks out from, a 2-hour road race, kill it. Go out and do those as hard as you can. Then I want my overreaching occurring. And that's understanding the bigger picture of coaching and how these scores and impacts fit in. So I know I'm getting a little preachy. You guys are certainly welcome to make me stop. But the reality is, that is the impact. That is what you want to do, right? That is how you use it. The score tells me, if I look at this time of the year, this was good work. If I look at this, if I look at the entire workout of this, I was going, actually my F4C goes a little deeper, right? I just simply spent more time doing that. So this was a 9, and you see I actually got a slightly less or same aerobic score. Is that the right thing to be doing at this time of year? I don't know. And again, I have I did these as tests at some point or something, but that's the question you as the coach. I would say right now, if somebody went out and did a 4x8 with that much anaerobic work, scoring a 9, it's too much work. It's too much work. You just should be maintaining. I want scores in the 5 to 7 range, maybe 5 to 8 range. I don't want to see those high end scores. Once I begin to understand what scores what, then I could begin to understand, if I did this by mistake and I gave it to one of my athletes and said, hey, do this, and they came back with a 9, I'd be like, oh crap, that was too much. So I learn from this. It builds awareness, right? And I said, let me reduce that down. Let me reduce that down to twice, or reduce the power down. I don't need that much power, whatever aspect it is. So those two workouts, you can see different workouts give me understanding of the scoring. What it doesn't give me, I'm actually going to get at this into a different point in my next case study, so let me do that. So that's just one case study. What is desired aerobic TIS for easy and recovery runs? So I already talked about the caveat. TSS is a tough metric to translate into running. You want those really low. 1-1, 1-2, anything under a 3. Again, go back to my point of read this chart, right? If I'm a recovery day, I want 1-2, more like a 1. Certainly no more than 3. If an athlete comes back with a 3, even aerobic 3, right, in a recovery day, if they come back with a 4, they probably went too hard. You have to assume the model's maintained and all those right deals, right? But it's just additional insight. So I just wanted to tackle that question. And again, we hope to improve training impact score for running. We need the underlying data to be more consistent. The underlying data tracks pretty well. I feel bad saying this, but if you're a Stride user, it will track pretty well with that. Some of the other devices like Garmin, just their overrating of power can make it tougher. How do I use TIS in multiple workouts per day? A couple of people asked me this question. It's not additive, meaning you should just look at each workout as I've been describing. I've seen the request, 5 times. How do I add them up for a day? It's not additive. It's just measuring the impact of that workout, as I've shown. So hopefully that should be pretty clear by now. Then I pulled some of the comment questions because the poll didn't leave enough space for some of the questions. So does it make sense to use the intersection of aerobic and anaerobic curves in the aerobic anaerobic contribution of bike power to chart TIS? And I showed that in an earlier slide. Reality is, yeah, that intersection gives a good insight. All right, I'll scroll all the way back. I don't want anybody to. This chart he's talking about, and this I actually marked the crossover point, and this is where your aerobic energy and your anaerobic energy and aerobic energy cross. So the reality is, in a generalization, and I'm generalizing here, if you think about how you make energy, and I didn't want to get too deep into the whole ideas. There's so much information, and I have some webinars on it. But the reality is, using power as a basis, and by the way, training and impact score is a power-based metric, not a heart rate. Heart rate has no role in it. You don't need a heart rate monitor. Too many variables in there. When you think about power, right? When we're looking at that ATP anaerobic aerobic chart, really once you start getting up to about 80 to 85% intensity of FTP, you start your anaerobic side, or your carb burning side, or your anaerobic glycolysis side, both really start kicking in and start to become the dominant energy source. So the reality is, when you're talking about that intersection and curve, you're usually right in that range. So when you start thinking about power and time, that will give some insight of when you'll see the tick up of the anaerobic energy, anaerobic strain occurring. The thing is, though, that training impact score, beyond just crossover point, is really a sensitive metric, and it's sensitive so interval modality can have an effect. Like in hindsight, I should have shown like a 40-20 VO2 max effort too with my other VO2 max efforts, right? And you'd actually probably see a pretty different impact score in a 40-20 doing 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off for 5 minutes as a VO2 max interval, using a classic terminology. You might see a different impact score of that, and that probably would have been a good thing in hindsight. I don't always get them. But the reality is, the metric is sensitive to the modality. So if you're doing intervals from sweet spot to VO2 max to 1 minute, whatever it is, look at different modalities of how you did that interval, from max to decline to steady state. All of those things will give insight. Next question, I think. So then someone asked, what's the pros and cons of riding 5 hours easy and getting a score of 7 compared to riding more intensely and getting a score of 7? The answer is it depends, right? Read this quote. I should have put it on the first intro slide and save it. Take a screenshot of it. Remember it when I send it to you. So elite athletic performance involves the integration of muscular, cardiovascular, and neurological factors that function cooperatively to efficiently transfer the energy from aerobic and anaerobic ATP turnover into velocity and power. And the thing is, with training impact score, right, you're only looking at one element. You're looking at the strain. In this particular statement, you could call it muscular or muscular metabolic. Cardiovascular is part of that. When we say aerobic, we tend to think, right? And obviously our cardiovascular system is a main delivery format of aerobic energy because you need oxygen within the system, but you're really talking about your muscular metabolic fitness. So to answer a question like that is, we give you the score, right? We're giving you the tool to figure out the scores. You, as the coach or the self-coached athlete, have to determine, by diagnosing you, your strengths, your weaknesses, your demands of your events, what would be the best answer. So it's funny, somebody wrote me yesterday about TISS score, and they're like, dang it, the only way I can get a 10 in training impact aerobic scores if I go out and ride like 5 hours, that's stupid. And Kevin and I literally, and to be honest with you, we made a joke about it. I just left it hang there on Facebook, and eventually the person took it down because somebody else answered it. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty much, you want a 10 on aerobic score, it takes a combination of duration and intensity. But then, I don't know, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, it's a 10, right? Now, if you're going to do an Ironman and you have a high muscular stamina demand. You have, your cardiovascular system has to be well developed because you're going to burn fat as fuel more. You want to be focusing on mitochondrial adaptation and other factors. Great. The 5-hour answer might be a better answer for you. If you're a local Cat 3 racer, not racing more than 90 to 120 minutes, maybe 2 times 20 SST or 3 times 15 SST and getting a 7 or an 8, which have a higher muscular force demand, maybe has a higher cardiovascular demand, you're breathing harder, that might be better for you. We just give you the score. So all 7s are not alike, right? What gives you the understanding is the impact. If you're time limited, you might say, oh, well, I find 3 times 20 is the fastest, shortest, most effective way I can get to a 7. Great. One word of caution. This is my wisdom, my opinion. If you figure out, wow, doing 3 times 18 minutes at SST gets me a 7 or an 8 every time, aerobic score, and that's a highly productive use of my time, and then all you do is do those, 2 things will occur. After about 6 to 8 weeks, you won't get faster, because you'll adapt to that particular stimuli, and then your body will get efficient at that stimuli, and your actual performance will go down. And then 2, your actual training impact score will go down because your model will tweak to what you're doing to that, and actually you'll get rest credit for doing that. So the reality is, the best answer for the athletes with options is a variety of ways to get a 7 is important. Sometimes the answer is the 5-hour ride, the 4-hour ride. Sometimes the answer is the 3 times 18 minutes. That's the art of coaching. Data only improves your decision-making capability. You still have to be the artist. Okay. And I'm going to scroll back a couple of slides because of my back and forth. I skipped one of my case studies. So sorry, not my most organized workshop webinar, but you're stuck with me. So you know what it is? Here it is. So here we go. I skipped this one. So here's one on aerobic. Here was an anaerobic focused training impact course case study. Here's an anaerobic or an aerobic focused one. So here's 2 interval sets. This second one is a longer with a little bit further out type of work, right? But if you look at this, this is 2 times 20 with over-unders, little surges about every 3 minutes, just counting them. And you can see during the little surges, everybody go, we go anaerobic. But yet you don't have a high anaerobic impact here. You don't have a high anaerobic impact, and you have a good aerobic impact. So your maintenance mode here, doing 2 times 20 at threshold. Now somebody's going to look at that and say, well, wait a minute, a 4 is only maintenance. 2 times 20 should be more impactful. And I get that question all the time. Is it? If it's individualized to the athlete and the fitness, what makes you think it should be more impactful? What if this athlete normally does 3 times 20 minutes with over-unders, right? And then suddenly, because of time constraint, they only do it 2 times. What if they're simply that fit? Well, look, this athlete's CTL is 88, so they're pretty fit. They've got an okay threshold at 226 versus it's set at 250. This might not be updated. So whatever, they do a certain number. Actually, I would say that threshold is based on, it's an indoor number. I know that this athlete's threshold's a little higher. It's me, and my threshold's probably around 260, 265. So the reality is, it assumes, right, when we look at these numbers, that that's the most we should have done. So then the athlete says, all right, I'm going to go out and do a bigger one. I'm going to do 3 times 15, roll around, do a little climbing home or something with a little more pep. Well, all they do is create a 5. All that extra work creates more anaerobic, right? And a little bit more aerobic. So this workout probably took about 90 minutes. This one was a little over 2 hours. Which is the most effective workout? This one go back to my point about different systems, has a little more neuromuscular power response in the surges. And if that athlete was a crit racer or a road racer or somebody living on varied terrain, I might find that more important than this. But for all that extra, for half an hour extra work and all that extra work, they didn't really score all that much higher. You, as the coach or the self-coached athlete, and look, CTL is the same. These were done. I remember doing, actually, this is me. I did these as a test. FRC is the same. Threshold is the same. Everything's the same at this point. So that gives you some insight of, wow, what is the appropriate workout for me? If there's a time frame and they have the time, could I have done, I mean, I already know the answer. If they would have done 3 times over under intervals, that probably would have been the best impact. But that's looking back through data and you making the art. We're just giving you the number, which again, I'm preaching, so you get the point. So this question basically starts here. Why my workout modality, major anaerobic aerobic, does not produce the TIS aerobic or anaerobic that I expected? I think looking at previous group discussions is a considerable summary of the questions. Well, one, you got to make sure your model's fed. The number of people who say to me, mine's broke, it doesn't work, and then don't maintain their model is frustrating, to be honest with you. If the model is maintained, and I know this person posting is pretty smart and good at it, so I assume it is, they have to just, the scoring is sensitive, and they need to be testing minor changes. Here's the answer, right? It is, it's just scoring impact on that system. So I would ask you the question, why your workout modality is not producing the results. That's exactly what we're helping you to do. The other thing that data does is it removes bias. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a perfect metric again. It's not an absolute metric again, but it is an insightful metric. It is a anecdotal, I won't call it anecdotal. It's a quantitative metric that gives good insight, and you, the coach, have to use it for that. If it's really wrong to what you're seeing, and you could validate that your model has been well maintained, I would absolutely ask you to step back and think about your strategy of coaching. Test some different workouts and see if you can improve it and see if that makes sense and resonates to you. It's often the answer lies in the art. Finally, is it possible to get an accurate TIS if you have different FTPs for TT bike, road bike? And then it goes on to just, I have an athlete that has a much higher FTP on the road bike due to different power meters and maybe position. So I wonder if the aerobic TI is possible by, so yeah, as you guys know, or the advanced users know, you can start tagging workouts and you can use the TIS expressions with tags and use the has tag, not hashtag, has tag metric to tag it. We have created subsports such as indoor, as you know, and we could probably expand on that in the future. One of the things that's making all of these metrics really hard, to some degree, is we have the ability, right? Kevin and I are our own worst enemies. We have the ability to give you all these subsports and submetric analytics, and now we're asking these questions. And in the past, we sort of knew there was a difference. Now we can really measure the difference. Now we can start creating unique metrics for those differences. Yes. So the person who asked that question, or people who are we are going to look next week at building some new charts that maybe can give people a head start on building specific TT, specific indoor. I mean, indoor is pretty easy. You can do it by the sport type right now. It'll work. But the reality is we'll give you some greater tools to do that. That's one of the things now that we have all these different ways of measuring all these different subsports. We're going to give you some better support on that over the next 2 weeks. So we should dig into that. So that kind of completes it for me. The workshop is always a little tough because I try to just tackle your questions that were asked in the Facebook group. I always end, though, on open questions for those of you who have already listened to me for an hour plus or an hour and don't want to stay on, feel free to drop off. Anybody who still has a question, you can punch it away in the questions box. I think I pretty much answered as I was going everybody's question. If not, ask it again now and I'll get back to it. And sorry if I didn't answer it. But you can punch it in now or forever hold your peace. So here's a question I didn't really answer, but I'll tackle it. If I'm doing an hour of sweet spot work, let's say 5 times 12 minutes over, say, 90-minute workout with an aerobic TIS of 5, is it simply saying I need to do more sweet spot time and zone to improve base period? So basically, Andrew, think the concern I have with what you wrote, right? I'm doing an hour of sweet spot work by doing 5 times 12 minutes over 90 minutes. So let's say you're resting 5 minutes in between. When you do a sweet spot at 12 minutes, one, that's too short, to be honest with you, in my opinion. I would never do sweet spot below 15 minutes, and typically only would do that when you first do your first couple of sweet spot workouts of the year. Try to never let sweet spot drop much below 15 minutes. Then 2, and don't get me wrong, 15 to 20 is good enough, but don't let it go below 15 minutes. Because here's what happens, right? When you drop below even 20 minutes, the athlete has to be disciplined to not turn sweet spot into threshold work. So when you say you did 5 times 12 minutes and got a training intensity score, aerobic score of 5, I wonder what your anaerobic score is. Because my concern would be your anaerobic score is also a 5 or a 6, in which case you're going too hard. Be very careful of workouts. The other downside of having an anaerobic and aerobic score, you always are going to want the best of both worlds, right? The reality is when you target the best of both worlds, you often get the worst of both worlds, particularly when you're talking about energy systems, because specificity rules. So my answer to you is, try different modalities. I would change from 5 times 12 to 3 times 20. Or 2 times 25 even at first, 50 minutes total, and see what happens. See if you get a higher aerobic score. That's the point. And then compare the workouts and say, oh, this one gives me a 7 aerobic score, and I don't have to go as hard. Maybe that's better for what you're trying to do. Do you think it's usable for VO2 max workouts, like you said in other webinars, to raise the roof of the house? To be more specific, could it mean to hit power FRC would go 9 to 10? Yes. So Marcus, if I was in the time phrase where it's time to raise the roof, right, as you say, and what I would say call it time to go max, right? And max is max. When you're peaking for an event, when you're truly now pushing towards peak, yeah, your anaerobic scores should be 9 or 10. And at that stage, your aerobic score, assuming by your event, it sounds like you're a road race, mountain bike person where those things are important. I would want my anaerobic scores in that time frame. In the last 5, 6 weeks, 4 weeks of coming into my peak, yeah, I'd want them in 9 or 10s once or twice a week. But I'd want those to be 9 or 10s. And at that point, I'd be looking for aerobic 4, 5, 6, maybe 5, 6, 7 aerobic, right? Understand what I said earlier, the scoring and the way the impact, it's about training over time. It's part of that periodization strategy that you have. So once it comes time to go hard, or you're in a phase where you're just raising VO2 max, you should see some higher scores. VO2 max, again, is your maximal aerobic. It depends if you're full on going at it, but you get my point. On the workout dash under workout insight, does recovery needed from workout take into account the training intensity score or just TSS? Liam, that's not an official WKO chart, so I can't answer that question. What sort of TIS scores would you expect from an effective VO2 max workout? You can't define effective for me, Matthew. What's effective? Are you raising the roof at that time? Are you trying to increase your VO2 max? Are you trying to get better short performance? Are you pushing towards peak? Or are you doing some VO2 max maintenance? So to be honest with you, even the question misses my point to some degree. Yeah, so if it comes time to increase your VO2 max, it's really individual. I would say the impact should be between 6 and 8 for increasing VO2 max. Once you get into the 9 or 10 anaerobic, even 8, 9, 10 anaerobic scores, you tend to be more anaerobic. You're going higher power, shorter time. So again, think about VO2 max, right? We tend to think about you have a power at VO2 max as a number. It's some number 60, 50, 40, whatever your number is, right? The reality is you should be thinking power at VO2 max. Let's say that's 350 watts. So I can make more power by becoming stronger, right? And I can mount more power, maybe becoming more metabolically fit. TIS is only measuring the metabolic fitness side. Is it possible to get a prediction of TIS and planning via Workout Builder and Training Peaks? Martin, it's not possible to get a TIS prediction via the Workout Builder and Training Peaks. We could potentially do it at some point in WKO because you need the model. The model is not on Training Peaks, so it wouldn't be predictable in that way. It would be an interesting thing to do, but here is I'll steal this from Dr. Andy Coggan to answer the question about predicting. The greatest prediction is history. So look back. You have training impact, right? So do what I did in my, it's just a really good exercise, you guys. Type in your search box like SST, right? You want to measure, look at all your different SST training. Type in the workout search bar, SST, and get all your SST workouts and just start flipping through them. And again, I have all kinds of mixed data in here. And see what they're scoring. See what they're doing. And use history to learn what, these impacts are. And again, this is not all my data. So sometimes you see 6.6, sometimes you see 1.1. It's mixed data. So you just don't know what's in here. But the reality is that's an excellent way to learn. Go back and look. Like I would see this workout here, and I'll close on this because it looks like my last question. So here's a test for you guys, is because I showed this one, right? Is this a good or a bad workout? I would say bad in general. A tweener, right? They went a little too hard, assuming the model's all correct underneath. They went a little too hard here. I would have rather have made sweet spot as an aerobic focus builder. It's an intensive aerobic effort. They went a little too hard, so they created too much fatigue, right, for the benefit at this point. Let's assume it was kind of a winter, mid-base kind of workout. And then this hard effort here just made it more tiring. They would have been better off just riding home aerobically. So that's how you might review those scores. I would rather have seen if they wouldn't have went so hard here, right, or finished hard here, just taking 5 watts off the top, I bet this would have been 7 and 3, and that would have been a good intensive aerobic workout. There's a key point. Okay, excellent, everybody. Really apologize about the delayed start. Really apologize about the delayed start and mix up of not getting this out. Debbie and I will make sure you get the PDF of this presentation. We'll always load it. As a matter of fact, this will be up on YouTube within an hour. It will be in the YouTube description. You could just download it directly. And you could grab it from there. And then once we post that video in the Facebook group, feel free to ask additional questions if you have them. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you using WKO5, and we'll talk soon.